The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson wasn't just a late-night show. It was a cultural phenomenon for 3 decades. It captivated audiences and cemented Johnny Carson as a television legend. A-list stars like Joan Rivers and Wayne Newton graced the stage, delivering unforgettable moments that kept viewers coming back for more. But behind the laughter and charm, not everything was as polished as it seemed. Carson's infamous temper sometimes spilled over, creating backstage drama that occasionally made its way into the public eye. In one particularly shocking incident, a guest pushed things too far, earning a lifetime ban from the show for crossing a line even the king of late night could ignore. From humble beginnings to global stardom, John William Carson, born on October 23rd, 1925 in Corning, Iowa, grew up in small Midwestern towns before his family settled in Norfolk, Nebraska. Evina's a child, Carson showed a knack for entertainment. A chance discovery of a book on magic at age 12 ignited his passion for performance, and before long, he was astonishing family members with card tricks. His mother, recognizing his enthusiasm, sweat him a cape, and by age 14, he was performing as the Great Carson, earning a modest $3 per show. Carson's early ambition and sense of adventure led him to Hollywood after high school, though his journey took an unexpected turn when he was fined $50 for impersonating a midshipman. The story, often retold, only added to his legend. In 1943, he joined the U.S. Navy during World War II, training as an officer under the V-12 Navy College Program, commissioned as an ensign. He served aboard the USS Pennsylvania, where he was responsible for decoding encrypted messages. Surprisingly, his military career also included an undefeated 151 record in amateur boxing, with most of his matches taking place on the ship. One of Carson's most memorable moments in the Navy came when he performed a magic trick for Secretary of the Navy James Verforstall when asked if he planned Tosti in the Navy. Carson replied that he intended to become a magician. Forstall challenged him to prove his skills, and Carr's quick-witted performance left an impression. It was a moment, one that confirmed his ability to entertain even the most serious of audiences. After the war, Carson seized the educational benefits offered by the military, enrolling at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Initially majoring in journalism with dreams of becoming a comedy writer, soon shifted to speech and drama, realizing his true calling was radio. His college thesis, How to Write Comedy for Radio, showcases analytical approach to humor, featuring tape skits and explanations of comedic techniques. The project allowed him to graduate in just 3 years with a degree in radio and speech, along with a minor in physics. Carson's early broadcasting career took off in 1950 when he joined WOW and WOW TV in Omaha, Nebraska. His morning television program, The Squirrel's Nest, showcases sharp wit and pen sent for satire. One standout segment involved interviewing pigeons on the courthouse roof, humorously exposing local political corruption. His ability to blend comedy with current events set him apart, and he soon found himself hosting local events, rubbing shoulders with some of the very figures he lampooned on air. A fortunate connection through the wife of a spoof politician, L.E.D. Carson, to Los Angeles in 1951, where he landed a role at KXT, a CBS-owned television station. There he launched Carson Cellar 1951 to 1953, a low-budget but cleverly written sketch comedy show that caught the attention of established comedians. Among his admirers was Red Skelton, who hired Carson as a writer in 1953. Carson's big break came unexpectedly the following year when Skelton knocked himself unconscious just before a live broadcast. Stepping in at last minute, Carson proved his ability to think on his feet and entertain an audience under pressure. Jack Benny, another comedy legend, recognized Carson's talent and invited him onto a show in 1955. Carson, imitating Benny's mannerisms, jokingly accused a veteran comedian of copying him a moment. Benny later recalled when predicting Carson's bright future in comedy. Throughout the 1950s, Carson hosted multiple shows, including the game show Earn Your Vacation 1954 and a variety program, The Johnny Carson Show. The career-changing show in the early 1960s late-night television was still finding its footing. NBC's Tonight Show had launched in 1954 with Steve Allen, a sharp-witted host who set the foundation for what would become the quintessential American talk show. When Allen left in 1957, Jack Parr took the reins, bringing a more personal and sometimes unpredictable style to the program. By 1962, however, Tonight needed a new host, and NBC had its eyes on a rising star. Johnny Carson. Carson had already made a name for himself on Who Do You Trust, where his humor and charm made him one of television's most sought-after personalities, yet when NBC first offered him the job, he hazes, it tated the idea of filling 105 minutes every night interviewing celebrities and keeping the nation entertained seemed daunting. Legendary figures like Bob Newhart, Jackie Glee, and Groucho Marx, and Joey Bishop had already turned down the role, but as NBC persisted, Carson finally gave in, signing on in early 1962. With 6 months left on his AB contract, Carson couldn't take over immediately. Instead, a rotating cast offguest. Hosts including Marks M.V. Griffin, Jerry Lewis, and Donald O'Connor kept the night running until Carson made his long-awaited debut on October 1, 1962. At first, the transition wasn't easy. Carson had doubts about his ability to carry the show, and his first year was filled with growing pains. But as he settled into the role, he began to define late-night television, blending humor, WI, and a keen ability to make even the dullest guests shine. Billy Wilder once said of Carson, by the simple law of survival, Carson is the best. He enchants the invalids and the insomniacs, as well as the people who have to get up at dawn. He is the Valium and the noodle of a nation. No matter what kind of dead asses are on the show, he has to make them funny and exciting. He has to be their nurse and their surgeon every night in front of millions of people. He has to do salto mortale. What's more, he does it without a net. Carson wasn't just hosting a show. He was shaping an institution. When the Tonight Show launched under his leadership, it took on a refined structure that would set the standard for late-night television. Ed McMahon, Carson's longtime partner from Who Do You Trust, joined as his announcer and sidekick, delivering the now iconic introduction. Here's Johnny S.K. Henderson led the NBC orchestra, providing musical interludes that gave the show a distinctive rhythm. Carson's monologue, a nightly ritual, opened each show with sharp, topical humor. If a joke fell flat, he had a knack for recovering with a self-deprecating quip. One of his go-to moves was a playful soft shoe dance to 4-2 cued by the band, which instantly turned a misfire into a laugh. Another trick was pulling the microphone close and deadpanning attention. Kmart shoppers clean up an aisle, for his effortless charm and ability to improvise made even awkward moments feel entertaining. A signature of Carson's monologue was his phantom golf swing, a small relaxed gesture that became an endearing trademark guest host would occasionally parody it. Bob Newhart, for instance, once minded rolling a bowling ball. Instead, the show's theme music, Johnny's theme, was composed by Paul Anka, adapted from his earlier song Toot Sight. Before taking over the Tonight Show, Carson wrote lyrics for it, though they were never used, which entitled him to 50% of performance royalties. The theme remained unchanged from Carson's first show in 1962 to his farewell broadcast on May 22, 1992, originally filmed at NBC's headquarters in New York's 30 Rock Roller Plaza. The Tonight Show made a major move on May 1st, 1972. Relocating to Burbank, California, the shift placed the show closer to Hollywood, making it easier to book top-tier celebrity guests as Carson's influence grew. So did his control over the format. In 1980, he cut back his hosting duties to 4 nights per week, leaving Mondays to a rotating roster. Guest host episodes were recorded in Burbank at 5:30 p.m. and fed via satellite to the Eastern and Central time zones. At 11:30 p.m. Eastern Pacific Time, viewers received a later feed at 11:30 p.m. their time. By the late 1970s, The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, was more than just a late-night program. It was a cornerstone of American television. Carson's influence on comedy, celebrity culture, and broadcasting was undeniable, and his impact extended far beyond the studio. In April 1979, after 17 years as the face of The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson sent shockwaves through the industry by announcing his departure. At the time, the show was more than just a late-night staple. It was a financial powerhouse, generating an estimated 177% of NBC's pre-tax profits as immense value to the network. Sparked swift negotiations, and by May 1980 he agreed to a new 3-year deal that redefined both his role and the show itself. The runtime was trimmed from 90 minutes to 60, and Carson himself reduced his hosting duties to just 3 nights a week, a shift that extended Tom Snyder's Tomorrow by 30 minutes to fill the gap. Yet even with a lighter schedule, Carson remained television's biggest star to accommodate his reduced presence. NBC introduced a lineup of guest hosts, with Joan Rivers serving as the permanent guest host from 1983 to 1986. When she left, the show returned to rotating guest hosts featuring comedy heavyweights like George Carlin and Gary Shandling. By 1987, Jay Leno secured a role, exclusively leveraging his willingness to keep his fee low for more bookings as Carson continued scaling. Back NBC kept audiences engaged with Thebes of Carson on Tuesdays airing classic reruns that highlighted his timeless appeal. Despite working fewer hours, Carson's influence and earnings only grew. By the mid-1970s. He was the highest-paid television personality, bringing in an astonishing $4 million per year, equivalent to nearly $193 million a day. Hollywood came calling, offering him major film roles, but he repeatedly turned them down. He passed on a Thomas Crown Affair, leaving the part to Steve McQueen, and declined a role in Blazing Saddles, which won a Gene Wilder. Even Martin Scorsese personally approached him for The King of Comedy, offering him a role opposite Robert De Niro, but Carson walked away, and the part ultimately went to Jerry Lewis. Carson's legacy was solidified in 1987, when he was honored with a Peabody Award marking his 25th anniversary on The Tonight Show. The board's praise captured his impact in American institution, a household word, and the most widely quoted American Avena. As his schedule shrank, his presence loomed larger than ever, cementing his place as a legend in television and comedy. Celebs who have been banned from The Tonight Show for decades. The Tonight Show wasn't just a talk show. It was the ultimate gatekeeper of Hollywood success. If you made it onto Johnny Carson stage, your career could skyrocket overnight. But what if you crossed Johnny? You might as well start packing your bags for obscurity. Carson took Rivers' departure personally and cut ties with her professionally. She wasn't just a guest, she was practically family. And maybe something more frequent guest host. She credited Carson for her rise to stardom. Their chemistry was undeniable, their banner effortless. But in 1986, Rivers made a career-killing move. She accepted a late-night show at Fox. Without telling Johnny first, when Carson found out, he was furious. Not only did he ban Joan from The Tonight Show, a punishment that lasted until Jimmy Fallon lifted the ban in 2014, but he made sure anyone who appeared on her show would never be welcome on his. But here's where it gets even juicier. Rumors swirled that Rivers and Carson had an affair. Could this ban have been more than just a business fallout? Some speculated that Rivers' department may have affected Carson on a personal level, though no concrete evidence of a deeper relationship exists for a rising comedian or actor that was social suicide. Rivers later admitted that she tried to mend fences, but Carson never spoke to her again, not once, before his death in 2005. And Rivers wasn't the only one who felt Carson's wrath. Rich Little, the master impressionist, who could mimic anyone, was once a Tonight Show staple. He was so good at impersonating Carson that he did it everywhere, at clubs, at award shows, and even on The Tonight Show itself. At first, Carson laughed along, but behind the scenes he hated it. By 1982, Little was gone. His invitations suddenly dried up. Later claimed that Carson banned him for mocking him too much, though Carson's producers insisted it was because his act got stale, or not. The message was clear: make fun of Johnny Carson too many times, and you disappear. Years later, Lil got the last laugh. He portrayed Carson in HBO's The Late Shift, a film that aired out all the dirty drama, all of the Tonight Show succession battle. But by then, Carson's iron grip had already made his mark. One thing was for sure: crossing, being banned from The Tonight Show could certainly impact a comedian's career, but many still found success through other platforms, and The Tonight Show, it has seen its fair share of Guess Who definitely crossed that line. Bobcat Goldthwait playing with fire, literally. When someone says they're on fire during an interview, it's usually just a metaphor, unless you're Bobcat Goldthwait on May 9th. 1990, for the eccentric comedian decided to literally set his chair ablaze during a live taping of The Tonight Show. The audience shocked the producers, freaking out Jay Leno, probably rethinking his entire career choice. This wasn't some pre-planned stunt. It was pure Goldthwait chaos. Security swarmed in after the flames were put out. So it was Bobcat's Tonight Show career. He was arrested, fined $700, and narrowly avoided actual jail time by agreeing to do PSAs about fire safety, because nothing says responsible role model like lighting talk show furniture on fire. Leno, ever the sport, allowed Bobcat to make a brief cameo later as a man buried in dirt. Message received. When Jay Leno first took over Tonight Show in 1992, Howard Stern was actually one of Opie's biggest offenders, but in 1995, Stern showed up ready to burn every bridge in sight. Flanked by two bikini-clad models, Stern had them engage in some very NSF antics, too wild even for late-night TV. The moment things got really out of hand, Leno didn't just sit there and fake a smile. He straight up walked off the stage. Stern's more explicit moments were edited out of the broadcast. And just like that, his Tonight Show days were over. Stern never wanted to let a grudge God-trash Leno for years. Afterward, eventually, the two made peace, but their late night relationship was dead on arrival. Kathy Griffin doesn't just get banned, she collects bans like their trophies. Leno wasn't a fan of her uncensored brand of K, which often involved wild tangents and a seriously filthy mouth. But Griffin didn't just get herself banned from The Tonight Show. She got the boot from multiple late night shows. Her most infamous moment, getting banned from The Late Show with David Letterman, making a triumphant return, and then stripping down to her underwear on live TV. Leno never one for unpredictability, didn't even consider giving her a second chance. Griffin, of course, loved the controversy. Ho Mandel, a 12-feet mistakes and bans come from outrageous behavior, others just from really bad comedy. Ho Mandel was not a troublemaker. In fact, he was a Tonight Show favorite, racking up 21 successful appearances. But on his 22nd visit, he made one fatal mistake. He brought a 12T. Saber-toothed tiger prop. Sounds weird. The bit was clunky. Logistics were a disaster. And worst of all, Carson wasn't on it. If there was one thing Johnny Carson hated, it was a guest pulling a stunt without warning him first. The result, a painfully awkward segment that completely bombed, and Carson, never W, the fake enthusiasm, made it clear he was not amused. That was the last time Mandel was ever booked on The Tonight Show. While Mandel bounced back with a successful career, probably still cringes thinking about that. 12-foot tiger moral of the store don't mess with late-night hosts if theirs. One thing these stories prove, it's that talk show hosts have long memories. And if you really mess up, you're not just losing a gig, you're losing an entire career opportunity, whether it's fire wild stunts or just bad comedy. Once The Tonight Show slams its doors on you, they usually stay shut. Dana Carvey. When a good impression goes bad, Dana Carvey made a name for himself with Saturday Night Live impressions, but there's one that didn't go over so well. His take on Johnny Carson. Carvey first mocked Carson in an SNL sketch called Corinio, which portrayed Johnny as anaging out-of-touch host desperately trying to be Arceo Hall funny. Yes, flattering, absolutely not. Carson hated it. So when Carvey dared to do the impression right to Johnny's face during a Tonight Show appearance, the talk show legend had enough to result in an instant ban. Carvey wasn't even allowed back to promote Wayne's World, one of the biggest comedies of the era. While Carson was nearing retirement, he made sure Carvey wouldn't get a second chance before he left. Lola Falana was once the reigning queen of Vegas, a stunning performer with a voice that packed showrooms. But her Tonight Show appearances came to an abrupt end when she made a mistake of speaking openly about race and bigotry. Carson, known for keeping things light, wasn't ready for an actual conversation about discrimination. He was caught off guard. The audience was tense. And after that, she was reportedly not invited back. Another fact of the Wayne Newton connection. Fana's Vegas residency was at the Aladdin, the same venue Newton had outbid Carson for ownership of, which led to a years-long feud. But more on that later. Fana got caught in the middle, and just like that, her Tonight Show days were over. Artelangi, the band that saved his life. Not all Tonight Show bands are about bad blood, some are about tough love. By the time Artie Lange was invited to Conan O'Brien's Tonight's Show, his an addiction had spiraled out of control, having seen him struggle on past talk show appearances. Conan refused to book him until he got sober. At the time, Lang was furious, but later he admitted the band may have saved his life. Years later, once he got clean, Lang thanked Conan publicly and was welcomed back on his TBS show. Sometimes getting banned is the best thing that can happen to you. Wayne Newton first versus Johnny Carson. The Vegas feud. Johnny Carson loved making fun of celebrities. Most of them took it as an honor. Wayne Newton was not one off those people. For years, Newton was a Tonight Show favorite with 30 guest appearances that helped make him a superstar. But in 1980, everything changed when Newton outbid Carson for control of the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. Suddenly, Carson wasn't laughing with no one anymore. Instead, he was laughing at him. Carson's monologues frequently joked about Newton, and some speculated they had an edge. Newton, however, took particular offense at the jokes. Newton, furious, marched into Carson's offices and delivered a direct warning: "You ever say my name again, and I will kick your ass." Did Carson stop the jokes? Mostly, but never invited Newton back, and their friendship was permanently shattered. Their feud remains one of the most famous in Hollywood history. Late-night talk shows might seem like fun and games, but for some stars, one bad move meant career exile. Whether it was mocking the host, getting too political, or just picking the wrong Vegas hotel, the Tonight Show proved time and again that if you mess with the king, you don't get a second chance. Johnny Carson's wild love life. Carson may have ruled late-night TV, but his personal life was a disaster, as especially when it came to marriage. For marriages, 3 divorces.